Quentin Tarantino wanted to turn one of Star Trek, the original series' funniest episodes, into an R-rated Star Trek gangster movie. In 2009, J.J. Abrams brought Star Trek back to the big screen, introducing a whole new generation to the beloved franchise. Set in the alternate Kelvin universe, Star Trek 2009 and its two sequels performed well at the box office and helped launch a new era of Star Trek television. Since Star Trek Beyond premiered in 2016, there have been numerous pitches and storylines suggested for the fourth Kelvin timeline Star Trek film, but Tarantino's plans offered a very different vision. In 2017, the news that Quentin Tarantino had pitched an idea for a Star Trek film sent the fanbase into a frenzy. In many ways, Tarantino's hyperviolent, profanity-filled films feel like Star Trek's opposite. While J.J. Abrams' Star Trek films relied more on sci-fi action than many of the earlier Trek films, they remained humorous and family-friendly. Tarantino's Star Trek script was inspired by TOS Season 2, Episode 17, A Piece of the Action, which sees the Enterprise crew visit a planet with a culture based on 1920s gangster-era Chicago. This setting could explain why the episode could suit Tarantino's style. Why Quentin Tarantino wanted Star Trek 4 to be a remake of TOS A Piece of the Action? It would have repeated another Star Trek movie's trick. Having directed films like Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, Tarantino is no stranger to crime drama, so it makes sense that he would choose A Piece of the Action as his Star Trek inspiration. With a screenplay penned by the Revenant screenwriter Mark L. Smith, Quentin Tarantino's Star Trek movie was reportedly set mostly on Earth in a 1930s gangster setting. Because of the changes in the Kelvin timeline, the events of Star Trek, the original series A Piece of the Action, never happened to Chris Pine's Captain James T. Kirk and his crew. In much the same way that Star Trek Into Darkness reimagined Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Tarantino's Star Trek movie could have reimagined the story from A Piece of the Action. Interestingly, A Piece of the Action is also one of Star Trek's funniest episodes, with Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock, Leonard Nimoy, doing their best impressions of 1920s Chicago gangsters. Although Pulp Fiction incorporates dark comedy, Tarantino's films are not exactly known for their humor. It's difficult to imagine how Tarantino's proposed film would have fit into the Star Trek universe, but it undoubtedly would have been, as Spock would say, fascinating. Why Quentin Tarantino decided not to make his gangster Star Trek 4? Tarantino didn't want Star Trek to be his final film. William Shatner in A Piece of the Action and Steve Buscemi and Harvey Keitel in Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs custom image by SR Image Editor. Quentin Tarantino has stated that he intends to retire after directing his 10th film. With 2019's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as his 9th film, Tarantino considers the Kill Bill movies to be one film. A Star Trek sequel would have come in at number 10. According to screenwriter Mark L. Smith in a 2023 Variety interview, Tarantino did not want his final film to be part of a major franchise like Star Trek. In January 2020, Tarantino finally confirmed that he would not be directing a Star Trek film, but still encouraged the studios to make the movie. In March 2020, the world ground to a halt due to the COVID-19 pandemic, placing an indefinite hold on any Star Trek sequel, including Tarantino's idea. Star Trek 4 has been in some form of development for nearly a decade, and most of the main cast have stated their desire to return. Despite this, it remains unknown whether Chris Pine and his Enterprise crew will ever get a proper send-off. But even if they do return for a final adventure, it seems highly unlikely that Tarantino's Star Trek, the original series-inspired gangster film, will ever happen.